Welcome to Broken Hearts of Reddit. This is a story about how one morning I gained everything, an inheritance of 125 million and a mansion in Los Angeles. But the very next day, I began losing it all, including my sanity. My wife, Sophia, the woman I trusted with my life, was preparing me for the worst. Not divorce, not infidelity, but utter destruction. Her plan was simple yet sophisticated. Declare me insane, lock me in a psychiatric clinic, seize my money, and most importantly, take my children. But fate had other plans. Our life in the suburbs of Los Angeles seemed like a flawless oil painting. Each day was filled with the light, warmth, and tranquility that our children and our cozy home gave us. Sophia and I had been together for almost 10 years, and I never doubted our future. She was my anchor in the world's stormy ocean, my haven where I could always return. I was firmly convinced that everything in our lives was the result of our shared efforts, our compromises, and our love. We had endured difficult times, and that only strengthened my faith. After I received the inheritance from a distant relative, life didn't so much change as it acquired a new, brighter hue. We moved into a huge, gleaming house that Sophia fell in love with at first sight. I saw in her eyes the sparkle of happiness that I had once ignited in her when we first started our life together. I believed that now we had everything: love, wonderful children, and the financial stability we had only dreamed of. It all started with small things that I initially didn't notice, or perhaps didn't want to notice. Sophia became more attentive to me, but this attentiveness felt somehow strained, as if she were following instructions. She started asking more often about how I was feeling, if I was tired or depressed. She brought me calming tea, which I never drank, and suggested we take walks in the park, which she used to consider boring. Each time I said I was fine, she looked at me with a hidden anxiety, as if expecting a different answer. One evening at dinner, she suddenly asked if I thought I had become a bit forgetful. I frowned, not understanding what she meant. "Well, you forgot that we agreed to take the kids to the movies last Saturday," she said, and a shadow flickered in her eyes that I couldn't decipher. But I remembered that conversation, and we had indeed planned to go, but it was she who suggested postponing it, citing her own tiredness. I didn't argue because I didn't want to ruin the evening's atmosphere, but her words left a strange, unpleasant feeling in me. Another incident happened a few weeks later. We had a longtime friend, Ethan. We had known him for years, even before we got married. He was like a part of our family, the godfather of our oldest son. Ethan had always been a reserved and sensible person, but lately, he had started behaving strangely. He became more secretive, avoided our gatherings, and when we did cross paths, he was distant, as if he was afraid of something. One time, he came over to congratulate us on the new house. I noticed him and Sophia exchanging strange, barely perceptible glances that I couldn't understand. These were not the looks of lovers. It was something else, something darker, hidden, something that made me uncomfortable. I dismissed it as my imagination, but that image, those brief, almost unnoticeable glances, got stuck in my memory like a sharp splinter. I began to notice that Sophia was spending more time with a friend I didn't even know. He was her new friend, and she always spoke of him with an excessive enthusiasm that was uncharacteristic of her. It seemed as if she was trying to convince me how important this person was to her, how good he was. I, of course, never objected, as her happiness was more important to me than anything, but her excessive fascination with this new friend made me wary. One time, I accidentally overheard their phone conversation. I was walking past the study that Sophia had turned into her workspace. She was sitting at the desk with her back to me, talking on the phone with someone. Her voice was quiet, almost a whisper, and she often looked around, as if afraid of being heard. In her voice, I heard something I hadn't heard in a long time, the same liveliness and energy that had once so attracted me. And although I couldn't make out a single word, I felt that this conversation was not about work, not about the children, not about us. It was something personal, something she was keeping secret. I kept telling myself that it was all my imagination. The inheritance, the stress of moving, the new life, all of it could be affecting me. But with each day, these small, barely perceptible cracks in our perfect picture grew wider. I started paying closer attention to Sophia, to her movements, to her words. Her smile became somehow rehearsed, her laughter less sincere. I began to notice that she avoided direct eye contact, and when I asked her if everything was okay, she always answered, yes, but her eyes said otherwise. They were full of some kind of longing, or maybe even fear. I didn't know exactly what, but I felt that behind this facade of an ideal life, something was hiding that could destroy everything we had built for so long. The strange, unpleasant feeling that had settled in my soul grew with each passing day. I could no longer ignore the little things that I had once blamed on fatigue or stress. They had turned into a whole wall that I couldn't break through. Sophia became even more closed off, and even our intimate moments began to feel like a game where she was playing a part, but her eyes were empty. I caught myself staring at her, trying to find at least one sincere emotion, but each time I hit a wall of her indifference. My suspicions reached their peak one morning when I couldn't find my old diary, which I had kept since college. I remembered leaving it in the study, in one of the drawers where old papers and documents were. I looked for it, but never found it. This was illogical. I knew that Sophia never touched my things, let alone my diaries. I started to doubt my memory, but I knew I couldn't have lost it. It was my only copy. Later, I discovered that Sophia had started locking her study, which was completely out of character for her. She had never done that before. I asked her why, and she replied that she just wanted to keep the children from touching her papers. I didn't argue, but her explanation seemed far-fetched. I felt that there was something more hidden behind it. One day, when Sophia wasn't home and the children were at my mother's, I decided that I could no longer tolerate this uncertainty. I had to find out what was happening. I went to her study and tried to open the door, but it was locked. I knew it was wrong, that I was invading her personal space, but my heart told me it was the only way to find out the truth. I used a thin wire that was always in our pantry, and within a few minutes, the door gave way. When I entered the study, I felt an unpleasant coldness. I couldn't explain the feeling, but it was strong. I started searching, though I didn't know what exactly I was looking for. I just followed my intuition. Soon I found what I was looking for. It was an old, locked drawer that Sophia used to store documents. I knew there shouldn't be anything special there, but my heart was pounding like crazy. I opened it, and inside I found not old documents, but a thick notebook with a leather cover. It was written in Sophia's small, familiar handwriting. I began to read, and what I saw there made me shudder. It was not a diary, but some kind of plan. A plan that detailed dates, events, my words, my actions. It said how I had forgotten that we were going to the movies with the children, even though I remembered that it was not true. It said that I was often in a depressed mood, that I had memory gaps, that I was becoming aggressive. And all of it was described in detail, with dates, and even with witnesses. I saw the name Ethan and her new friend, whom, as it turned out, I had never seen. I read this, and with every word, my heart clenched in terror. This was a plan that was supposed to prove my mental abnormality, a plan in which I was to be locked up in a hospital and have everything that belonged to me taken away. And at that moment, I felt like I was losing my mind, because it couldn't be true. It was some terrible dream that I couldn't stop. I wanted to drop everything and just leave, but something made me continue. I turned the page, and my heart stopped. There, between the pages, was a photograph. It showed Sophia and her new friend, whom she mentioned so often. They were standing in front of some house, and they were hugging, and on their faces were smiles that I had never seen. But the worst part was not that. The worst part was that I recognized this man. It was Ethan, my best friend, my son's godfather, the one I trusted most. That evening, she prepared a cup of tea for me. I took it from Sophia's hands. Her fingers were cold as ice as she handed me the hot, mint-scented drink. I pretended to take a sip, but instead, when she turned to adjust the cushions on the sofa, I poured the contents of the cup into the ficus plant that stood in our living room. The ficus was a gift from my mother for our wedding anniversary, and with a bitter smirk, I thought that it was probably destined for the same fate as me. Sophia turned to me and smiled. I saw not warmth in that smile, but a predatory thirst, and that was the most terrible thing. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay next to her, and her breathing, once so familiar and calming, now seemed ominous to me, like the breath of a predator that was waiting for its moment. I felt my heart clench with fear, and I knew that I couldn't stay here for another minute. I had to gather everything I had and run, but where? They controlled all my accounts, all my documents. I was like in a cage, and they held the keys. At dawn, I sent a short message to Daniel. They want to take me today. Come. I didn't know how much he understood what was happening, but I knew he would come. I knew he was my only chance. I waited for him, and every minute seemed like an eternity. Sophia woke me up with the same fake concern. She made me breakfast, and to avoid suspicion, I ate it. She looked very pleased, as if everything was going according to plan. She said, we had to go to the doctor. She didn't call him a psychotherapist. She spoke of him as a friend who can help. I knew she was lying. The drive was long and excruciating. I sat in the car, and I looked at the city that I had once loved so much, and it seemed foreign to me. I felt that I was losing everything that was dear to me. My home, my children, my life. I looked at Sophia, who was driving the car, and I saw in her not the woman I loved, but a monster who was ready to tear me apart. She looked as if she was about to fulfill her dream. We arrived at a private clinic that looked like an expensive hotel. It was surrounded by a high fence, and guards stood at the gate. I realized that this was not an ordinary clinic. This was a prison for the rich, a place where people disappeared forever. I looked at this building, and I felt a cold fear enveloping me. Sophia took me to the doctor. He was a gray-haired, seemingly kind man who smiled at me, but in his eyes, I saw the same cold glint as in Sophia's. He began asking me questions that were very strange. He asked me if I heard voices, if I saw things that were not there. I answered, no, but he wrote something in his notebook that I couldn't see. I realized that he had long ago decided that something was wrong with me. I looked at him, and I felt a wave of hopelessness wash over me. I was alone here, against all of them. I felt that I was losing my mind because everything that I had once known had turned into a lie. But I knew that I was not crazy. I knew that they were trying to lock me up in this prison, and I had to fight. The doctor said that he had to talk to me alone. Sophia left the office, and I was left alone. I looked at him, and I saw in his eyes that he was ready to do anything to carry out their plan. He started talking about my children, about how they would be safe, how they would be happy. He said it with such indifference that I almost screamed. I felt that he was not a human, but a monster. I looked at the door, and I waited for Daniel to appear. I waited for him as if he were my only salvation, my only chance for freedom. I felt that they had won, but I couldn't give up. I had to fight until my last breath. And at that moment, I heard the door open. The door swung open, and my brother, Daniel, stood on the threshold. His face was pale and angry, and a determined fire burned in his eyes. Behind him were two men in uniform who, I realized, were police officers. He didn't say a word. He just walked up to me and put his hand on my shoulder. At that moment, I felt the weight of the last few weeks fall off me. I was saved. The doctor who was sitting opposite me changed his expression. His self-satisfied smile disappeared, and he looked frightened. He tried to say something, but Daniel interrupted him. "We have a search warrant, doctor," he said, his voice cold and firm. "We know what you are trying to do. You are in collusion with Sophia and Ethan." I looked at the doctor, and he couldn't say a word. He was cornered, just like me. I felt emotions overflowing me, anger, relief, and something that was like revenge. I wanted them to pay for everything they had done. The police began to search the office, and within a few minutes, they found what they were looking for. It was not only the diary, but also records that described my symptoms in detail, as well as instructions on how they should behave to help me. There were also documents that said I was incompetent, and that Sophia was my legal guardian. This was the plan they had developed to take everything that belonged to me. Soon, Sophia entered the office. She saw me and Daniel, and her face changed. She realized that everything was over. She tried to run, but she was detained. I looked at her, and I felt nothing. I felt neither love nor hatred. I felt only emptiness. The woman I loved turned out to be a traitor, and I couldn't forgive her. Ethan was also arrested. I found out that they were planning to leave together, taking the money and the children. I looked at him, and I felt that my life had been a lie. The man I trusted the most betrayed me for money. After that day, my life changed. I divorced Sophia, and I was granted full custody of the children. I didn't want them to suffer because of her actions. I decided that I had to start a new life, where I would be happy, and where my children would be safe. I bought a house in another city, and I started a new life. I couldn't forget what had happened. Memories of betrayal, of lies, of the pain that I had experienced haunted me, but I didn't give up. I knew that I had to be strong, because my children needed me. I knew that I had to live, and I had to be happy. And on that day, when I looked at my children, I realized that I had not lost everything. I had only lost one person who was not worthy of my love. And that was my greatest gain. The trial was long and painful. The testimonies, evidence, and proof collected by Daniel and the police left Sophia and Ethan no chance. In the end, Sophia was found guilty of fraud and attempted incapacitation, sentenced to 3 years in prison. Ethan received the same sentence. This verdict was for me not so much a victory as a bitter relief. I got justice, but I lost a person whom I once considered my family. While Sophia was serving her sentence, the children and I tried to get our lives back on track. I moved to another state to avoid the commotion and began working on restoring our emotional well-being. The children were my only support, and I tried to be both a father and a mother to them. Daniel was always there, supporting us and helping with everything. 3 years passed unnoticed. I was sure that Sophia would leave us alone, but I was wrong. As soon as she got out of prison, she started calling me. Her voice sounded unnatural. There was something hysterical about it. She threatened me, demanded her share of the inheritance, believing that I owed her for the years we were together. She claimed that I had stolen her happiness and wealth and that she would get everything back. I didn't answer her calls, but her threats became more frequent and aggressive. Soon she started trying to see the children. She would ambush them at school, try to talk to them, but the children, who already knew about her betrayal, were afraid of her and ran away. Her behavior became more and more inadequate. She would come to our house, scream, throw stones at the windows, and cause scandals, which scared not only us, but also the neighbors. One day she tried to break into the house, claiming that it was her house and her children. I had to call the police, and they detained her. In court, where she was brought again, she behaved very strangely. She laughed, cried, and shouted that I had been deceived, that it was all a conspiracy against her. The judge ordered a mandatory psychiatric examination. The result didn't surprise anyone. The specialists concluded that she had a serious mental disorder caused by stress, loss, and an obsession with money. She was sent to a psychiatric clinic, the very one where she had once wanted to send me. I have never been a malicious person, but at that moment, I felt the bitter irony of fate. She got what she wanted so badly, but I couldn't be happy. I felt sorry for her, sorry for what she had become. I realized that she was not only a traitor but also a victim of her own greed. Many years have passed since then. I never remarried. My children have grown up and become happy people. I live in my own house, and every day I look at my children and remember that I once lost everything. But I have no regrets, because I found myself and my children. I realized that true treasures are not in money, but in the people who love you, and in loving them in return.